After a few shots at the side hills, the posse gathered together. In a low-voiced conference, they decided to go back home, while the going was good. While winding up the canyon through the brush, cat-footing back to their stamping horses, one of the posse looked back. Thinking he saw a figure crawling from behind one of the rocks on the hillside, he chanced a snap shot. It was enough. One of the youngsters with Cap was hit in the thigh. While the posse mounted up and pounded up the canyon a good deal faster than they had ventured down, Cap sidled along the talus slope to his wounded rider. "How bad you hit, boy?" he inquired. "Bad enough, but it don't seem to be bleeding much." Cap squatted down and examined the deep flesh wound halfway between the hip and knee. When his match burned out, he said, "It's on the outside of your leg. I think he can still ride. But we better not camp here on the river tonight like we usually do. We can't risk it. The moon will be up pretty soon. We better go right on to the Roost before you stiffen up and can't ride." Overtaking the horses, Cap put the lead man on the bell mare. Crossing the river, they started up the rocky intricacies of the Angel Trail, named that by Cap, who insisted it took wings to get over it. The loose horses, Cap had managed only about 40 head this trip, were slipping on the bulging red slick rocks, losing hair and hide, the smell of burnt hooves pungent on the night air. The wise old saddle horses, after the riders dismounted to lead them up the steep slopes of naked sandstone, hung back on the bridle reins, bracing and balancing themselves for the difficult climbs. Many of these steep pitches, over and around which the trail snaked, led down to a drop-off into a black canyon, so it behooved a man to climb fast and expertly and give a horse all the help he could. Sometimes the leader could find a few handfuls of sand in a depression in the rocks and throw it up on the trail to give the horse's hooves a little purchase. The trail wound over the canyon walls and around rims clearly visible in the bright moonlight, but there were places where the snorting horses smelled out the way in the dense blackness of lead shadow. The wounded man dropped back, no longer able to steady his horse on the trail, or, weak from shock and loss of blood, to climb the worst places unaided. Cap and the other rider waited for him. Cap turned the saddle horses of the two boys into the bunch and left the young fellows to make their way up the trail afoot. He told them it wasn't far and that he would wait on top with their horses. When they finally climbed out on top, he was waiting and told them where to find the camp. Daylight was just beginning to show when the two boys rode into camp in a blind draw near what was to become known as Dead Man's Hill. They dismounted, and the wounded boy dragged himself to a bedroll. When Cap had settled the horses to graze in the Roost flats and returned to camp shortly after sunup, he gave the boy what rough first aid he could. Cutting away the pant's leg, stiff with dried blood, he found the wound was far worse than he had thought. The leg was badly swollen. The boy had lost a lot of blood and was far gone in shock. By noon, Cap knew there wasn't much hope for him. The young fellow died that night. He was buried somewhere near Dead Man's Hill, bestowing that name on the prominent landmark. After delivering his horses at Telluride, Cap returned to Hanksville, where he had a shack in Bull Valley. It was there that Butch Cassidy found him in the spring of 1884. Chapter 2. The May sun was just going down behind the mountains above Kingston Canyon when Robert Leroy Parker swung up the canyon on his race mare Bess. The two men holding the horses, bunched in the head of the canyon, looked at each other meaningfully. "Here he comes," one of them spoke. "I was afraid he'd let his mother talk him out of it. Funny he insisted on telling her goodbye. Well, we could have turned the horses back on the range, and no one would have been any the wiser. I'm not sure I like this way of doing things." "Having that 18-year-old kid drive these horses to Telluride and then us show up and collect?"